Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you for inviting me.
How you doing, sir?
I'm all right, very okay.
Okay.
A whole lot of turbulence going on all over the place, but somehow, somewhere, we find a common ground and a balance.
Very important.
Yes.
All right, straight to business. We know where we are right now. The Senate suspended Senator Natasha yesterday for 6 months. Is the Senate empowered to suspend a duly elected senator? I have to phrase it like that to remind us that she is a representative, a duly elected senator for 6 months.
Yes, it's an institution of government and they have their own rules. These rules are guided by maybe the nature of the institution itself and the fact that it's a parliamentary thing. It has to ensure that its members act in accordance with the rules that are laid out, rules of the House. The power to suspend is also subject to the provisions of the Constitution depending on the circumstance of the case. Okay. And it is not peculiar to the Nigerian system alone. In the United States Congress, yes, of course, they have the power to discipline an erring member. The Senate and the houses, they all have their powers. In Great Britain, they have that power to suspend, to expel, to probably punish one way or the other, impose one sanction or the other. Withdrawal of privileges and all that, and it's just to ensure that there's sanity on the floor of the parliament. I wouldn't expect that provisions or those provisions to be invoked arbitrarily, because you expect that people who are in the Senate are matured citizens, people who have a sense of decorum and they have a sense of responsibility as to why they are there in the first place. So you'll not very much expect that you begin to see erring parliamentarians anyhow, except in circumstances that maybe one falls within their public space and into their eyes, and maybe they feel that a victimization could be possible, which could be what is the defining essence of the whole of the controversy between Natasha and Akpabio.
Yeah, there are those opinions that she's been victimized, but let's look at the merits of this particular case. It started because of seating arrangement, and we know that there is, I don't know if it's a policy, a protocol, or even a law on the floor of the House about seating arrangements that has to do with majority and minority. And because 2 senators defected, it was necessary, according to how things work on the floor, that Natasha does not function from that position. Now, the chief whip, I believe, communicated this to her, and she said no, she was not going to move. He reported to the Senate President, and that's how it got ugly, and a bad thing became worse and uglier. So for this particular case, because she spoke back to the senator, she refused to move when he told her to move. All of this is on video. Is that enough to suspend her?
Well, the sitting arrangement in the Senate is something that's within their own rules. But I think this controversy has raised up a lot of issues that we must begin now to look at the Senate rules, the rules of procedure for this Senate, and see how to which extent they conform with the provisions of the Constitution. You cannot allow people in very important positions of authority like that to be making rules for themselves. Some of those rules could be draconian, some of them may be unconstitutional. But I know that I watched it. I watched the proceedings to some large extent. I do not know the backdrop happenstances that culminated to that situation, but I know that I saw Senator Natasha Akpoti raising her hand and holding a green book or a red book. I can't remember the color.
She was reading off
and calling on that she's standing on Order 10. Whatever Order 10 is talking about, I think it has to do with the privilege of members to raise certain issues, and she was being shouted down. I don't think it's something sufficient to raise this degree of dust that we are experiencing. I think it's something that should have been taken care of immediately. She doesn't like the seat. She has a right. She has a right under the law to raise it, to state it, and to be heard. On that day, she was definitely not heard, and the thing that happened was that she was immediately asked to move out of the Senate, out of the Red Chamber.
She was evicted,
yes, and I don't think that should be sufficient to get that kind of response from the Senate. I would rather say that these issues, they thrive on trivialities, things that even little children can take care of in playgrounds. But then it has gotten to this stage and it's becoming a very sore issue within our national politics. It's very, very unfortunate. But then the issue is not one that is sufficient to evoke the powers of the National Assembly for suspension. And no matter the issue, I don't think the National Assembly has the power to suspend a member for 6 months. Aside that, there are great many precedents that cover that area on the power of the Senate to discipline, and it cannot be that excessive, because if you make it 6 months, of course, that means you've put the person on trial, and it's a criminal sanction for somebody to be out for 6 months, and the other ancillary orders made by the Senate appear a little draconian to my liking, because you cannot tell somebody that you're suspended, and for that you cannot come within the vicinity of the National Assembly. Everybody has a right to go to the National Assembly. All legislators, they have their galleries where members of the public can come and observe and watch. And for somebody who's representing the people and a valid member of the House of the House or the Senate cannot just be excluded like that forcefully from the office. And the issue of our remunerations, our allowances, is something I don't think the Senate should even talk about in the first place. They don't have that jurisdiction there. She's not an appointee of the Senate. I think to a large extent the Senate, they have the power to regulate themselves, to ensure that there's civility within the confines of the hallowed chambers of the Senate, and people behave themselves in a proper manner, and that legislative business is done with every dint of decency. But then in punishing an erring member, you have to look at it from every point of view of the circumstances resulting to whatever, and maybe give the person the opportunity to be properly heard.
Okay, so we will do a bit of that. We have a break coming up, but let's go back to where this started. I hope that within the little time we have before the break, we can play all of this. This is how all of this drama started.
The proceedings of the Senate. 2 senators from the PDP, that is Senator Ned Nwonko.
Which faction of PDP?
And also Senator Francis Ezenwa of the Labour Party, also decamped to APC, thereby necessitating their movement from the other side to this side, thereby creating vast spaces in the opposition side. And in the exercise of the powers conferred on the Senate President of the Senate decided to rearrange this seat. And I was surprised to report that Senator Natasha, having given another seat, refused to vacate her former seat. Now that Senator Natasha insisted on staying on her former seat in spite of the rearrangement of the seat, I am craving for indulgence to resume the seat that has been lawfully allocated to her.
Dismissed Senator Natasha, please, you are not recognized to speak from there. That is the order of the Senate.
Sir, order 10 on privileges. Any senator may rise at any time to speak upon a matter of privilege suddenly arising, and he shall be prepared to move without notice. A motion declaring that the content of breach of privilege has been...
Show me the session that allows suspension immediately.
All right, so that was the beginning of the trouble that has become a disaster. After the break, we talk about it. Stay with us.
Education is a key driver for growth for any economy. With the increased use of technology in various sectors, it's time to beam the spotlight
me in the studio. You're welcome once again, sir.
Thank you very much, Sam.
All right. So the idea that a constituency will not be represented for half a year is difficult to imagine. But while we might say that it's illegal, it's harsh on the part of the Senate and all of that, we need to remember that the Senate has a disciplinary committee, which is the Committee on Ethics, Privileges and Petitions. And if the members
to what punishment or sanction could be given to a legislator, it's not an open check for the Senate president or the head of the House or the committee to bandy around whatever they think is appropriate as punishment. It must conform with the provisions of the Constitution. A member of a house, a legislative house, is not there by herself. She represents a constituency, and the position of the constituency must at all times be respected. Like I told you, the disciplinary measures are there, but there are very little disciplinary measures which are just there to act as a restraint and to act as maybe something that will operate to remind the rest of the members that we have to conform with the ethical rules of the House, not a wholesome suspension for 6 months. Where does the Senate have that power from? Which act or which order or which law enables the Senate to suspend a member representing a constituency from participating in the proceedings of the House for that long period of time? Just because the rules are there and they subject themselves to it. It's subject to a whole lot of things, and you cannot suspend a member because the representation of the member is also the representation of the constituency is representing, and you cannot throw it out anyhow because simply because maybe you want to have put a sledgehammer on the representative, or maybe keep its constituents out of the state of affairs of the country from legislated for them. It is never done.
But so, Oguche, they've been getting away with this. Ningi was suspended from the House for allegations of budget padding. Shehu Sani said he was almost suspended because at the time he had revealed the salaries and entitlements of the senators. According to him, it was the intervention of Saraki and I think Ekweremadu at the time. He said that. So that means senators have been suspended before now. Senators have been threatened to be suspended and nobody fought it.
In spite of the fact that we have over 2 decades of democracy, you see things are still being done arbitrarily. Particularly what happened at the floor of the Senate yesterday, I think it was more of, do I call it the tyranny of the majority than the ordinary legislations or regulations that should man a Senate, an authority as exalted as the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. They get away with it because we've not looked at it. For instance, we are now beginning to look deep and let us find out what actually are those rules that they use to govern themselves, the extent to which it conforms to the provisions of the Constitution. The Senate, for instance, they have a legal department that should have advised them that these are the proper way to get things done. For instance, having the president presiding over an issue, over a controversy which is directly involved, having the ethics. You just played out the tape, and all that was done was, I think, the majority leader or something told the House that Senator Natasha had refused to abide by the directives of the of the Senate president, and nobody listened to her. She was raising an order, a point of order of that 10 and other 10, and before the Senate president said they should whisk her away. Was her right properly preserved? Was she given the rights to present her case? Of course, we've not looked at the rules to see the circumstance or the dynamics that should inform the Senate president in allocating seats. I'm sure it's not part of the rules. Probably it's something that he exercises.
It comes off as an internal.
I don't think it's part of the rules. Maybe it could be an internal something, but if it's something that's enforceable in such manner that sanctions can be imposed on members, then it should be part of the rules. So what aspect of the rules, and nobody has quoted it, that says that some senators will sit in that side and other senators will sit on the other side?
All right.
So we have to go into the nitty-gritty of what those rules are talking about, what the extent to which the Senate president or the presiding officer of the House of Parliament can can enforce it and the nature of such enforcement before we can begin to talk about doing things the right way. Okay. They cannot have a blanket approval to do things anyhow. The idea of suspending a member of the Senate for 6 whole months, as far as I'm concerned, sounds very bizarre.
I can imagine.
Totally bizarre.
Oh, well, with the time we have left, it's important that you are part of this conversation. 0817-923-0002. Legal practitioners have spoken against the suspension of Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan. And my guest believes that the Senate are not well within their rights to suspend an elected member of the House who represents a constituency for 6 months. What say you? Hello, good evening. Hello, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Sam.
Good evening. What's your name?
Obed Chima.
All right.
I'm calling you from Port Harcourt.
Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Sam. I think that suspension equally the excuse given by the ethics committee where they rejected her petition and all that. I don't see it as a cogent thing. I think I go with what Ade and you have said. Because if you look at voting, you understand that there is indeed a conspiracy on what transpired there. And I am perturbed that not even the opposition were able to speak on the side of their own. Everybody joined together and Natasha Akpoti on the other side. It's very unfortunate. So I think what they should have done, Senate President is not supposed to be among people who are supposed to decide on that very case. Because as a person who is a party to the matter, you are supposed to have excused yourself. You understand? Because this is not the first time we have had issue like this coming, accusation being laid in the name of Senate President. So I think he should have excused himself on that committee. You cannot preside over the matter that concerns you. Yeah. So I see that a conspiracy, and if Natasha challenge it, it's not going to stand, I tell you.
All right, thank you very much. A few more calls waiting to be taken. Christian on WhatsApp says the call to squash the 6-month suspension and reduce it to 14 days. And the next one says they refuse to give her a fair hearing, which is an offense against her human rights of expression. Why would lawmakers always break the law? She submitted the court injunction, yet they went ahead and suspended her. Ezekiel Isaiah says, Divine calls from Woji. Hello, Divine.
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening.
I have just a few things to say quickly, because there's an angle to which probably we are not looking at.
Okay.
A friend who worked in an established institution was on transfer, and his colleague, he was not happy with it, he told his colleague, and his colleague also working in the institution, protested on his behalf.
Okay.
And when the student of that institution sat on that case, the first question they asked him was, when you are on transfer and you are not pleased with that transfer, do you report before you protest or you protest before you report? And he said, he knew the law, and he said, I report before I protest. Said, why were you protesting before you report?
Okay.
Why, that was the right channel. Now, you know very well, you represent a constituency, a people. You are well respected and distinguished. There are ways to handle this. You have been given a seat which the Senate President has the power to change seat. You know of that. Now you have given a seat, report to that and say, even though I have reported to this, I just wanted to obey the rules and the power of the Senate President. But please, I am not happy with it. You cannot give a protest, give reasons. Because now, right now, you have not reported to that seat. You are reading on that term of your privileges, which is very wrong. You cannot stand on the wrong order by claiming your right.
Yeah, but the point is,
it's very wrong.
She's trying to fight going to the seat. So if she has gone to the seat, then the purpose has been defeated.
No, see, you go to your seat and fight from there. People who support you cannot look at it, take a holistic look at it and say, I think this is wrong. I think we should let her go back to the seat, or let's see what happens.
If she goes to that seat, it will be hard to go back. Oh.
You said what?
If she goes to the new seat, it will be hard to go back.
My brother, okay, why this fight now? To what end is this fight? Don't also forget. In 2014, Remo Omoki traveled with Mr. Jonathan out of this country. This woman accused me of sexual harassment, this same woman.
Yeah.
After all the protest on social media, the man got a proof that very day you said I harassed you, I was in the US. The man had proof. And then she brought all her claims for social media. What are you talking about here?
All right, thank you very much, Divine.
Be careful.
Obinna from Irebe. Okay, we've lost that call and we're getting to the end of this conversation. I'll run through comments very quickly. The senators work with the ambience of the law. They already know what is due to the law, so we only do what we are best known for. Talk and talk, they say, says. And Godday Temen says suspension of Natasha is unconstitutional. The president should step aside because he cannot be a judge in his own case. NDBC says Senate president is one of the problems we have in this country simply because he's given President Tinubu what he wants. That's why they conspired against that woman. They should bring that woman back and immediately remove Akpabio as a Senate president. Chief Oguche, we're down to the final minutes. What needs to be done now to correct what is believed to be an error?
What needs to be done is that there's an order of the Federal High Court restraining the committee from doing their work. That order ought to have been respected. Okay. And for I think some people should be taken for contempt because we have to get these things working before we can now begin to point fingers at people unnecessarily. The idea of people acting on things that have been taken care of by judgments and decisions of court amounts to defiance of court decisions, and people should be punished for it. Series of decisions, Ali Ndume against the Senate says you cannot suspend for more than 14 days. There are several of them that says the punishment should be minute, and even there's a recent decision of the Court of Appeal in Oguche that states very, very clearly that you cannot suspend anybody for any member of the parliament for any reason whatsoever. And these are decisions of courts that are already established. And when people decide to do a different thing altogether, I think they should be punished for it. It's not just to refer to these cases and these decisions and say this president or what. Presidents of course, if defied, people must pay for it. That's my submission.
Thank you very much, Chief Oguche, for your time. It's always